So you want to own a ranch, thousands of acres of open land, a herd of cattle grazing across it, and the timeless American dream of turning grass into beef, into money. You picture it as a business that runs on sunshine and rain. The grass grows for free, the cattle eat it for free, and every fall you load them up and drive to the bank. It looks like the most self-sufficient business on earth. Now here's the number that should stop you before you sign anything. A working cattle ranch in America typically returns somewhere between 2 and 4% a year in cash. And that's in a good year. Many return less, some return nothing at all. You could take the millions of dollars it costs to buy a ranch, put it in the most boring index fund in existence, and beat the cash return of raising cattle without ever getting up at 5 a.m. to pull a calf out of a snowbank. So why do people keep paying record prices to own them? The answer is the whole secret of this business, and it has almost nothing to do with cows. By the end of this, you'll understand why the cattle are barely a rounding error, why the real product of a ranch is something you can't put on a plate, and why the richest ranchers in America are often the ones losing the most money on beef. Because a ranch is not really a cattle business. It's a land bank with a cattle-shaped tax strategy stapled to it. What you're actually buying, the thing that makes the money, is the dirt. The cattle are there to justify the dirt, to feed you a little income while you wait, and to unlock a set of tax advantages that quietly do more for your net worth than the herd ever will. Understand that, and every strange thing about ranching suddenly makes sense. Let's start with what it costs to get in, because ranch land is priced in a way that has nothing to do with how much beef it can produce. As of 2025, the average value of U.S. pasture land was around $1,920 an acre, while overall farm real estate averaged about $4,350. But those averages hide everything. Grazing land in the Texas Panhandle might run $1,700 an acre, while a ranch within driving distance of Austin can run $8,000 or $10,000 an acre. With a trout stream and mountain views, even $30,000 an acre. And here's the tell. That expensive land often produces the exact same amount of beef as the cheap land. You are not paying for grass. You're paying for scenery, water, and location. For what the land is, not what it grows. So a real working ranch is expensive. Even an entry-level operation of a few hundred acres with basic fencing and a water well runs from $500,000 to well over $1 million. A proper cattle ranch, 1,000 acres or more with a house, barns, corrals, and equipment, climbs into the multiple millions before you've bought a single cow. And most lenders in 2026 want around 25% down on a working ranch. This is a business where the cost of admission is measured in millions, and the cash it hands back is measured in low single-digit percentages. Now the cows, because this is where the dream quietly dies. The rancher's real job title isn't cowboy, it's grass farmer. Your entire operation is limited by one number: carrying capacity, the number of cattle your land can feed. Depending on rainfall, it can take anywhere from 5 acres to over 50 acres of range to support a single cow and her calf for a year. So a 1,000-acre ranch in dry country might only support 40 or 50 cows. In a typical cow-calf operation, each of those cows produces roughly 1 calf a year that you raise and sell. And even with cattle prices at record highs, the U.S. herd in 2025 was the smallest since 1951, pushing prices to all-time records. The math is humbling. After you subtract the cost of feed, hay, veterinary care, fuel, equipment, and breeding, the profit on a single calf is often just a few $100s. Multiply a few $100s by 50 cows and you begin to see the problem. A ranch that cost you $2 million might clear $20,000 or $30,000 from its cattle in a good year. That's a rounding error on the land value. And the costs never sleep. Cattle have to be fed through winter when the grass is gone, and hay prices swing wildly with drought. A single tractor costs more than $50,000. Fencing runs thousands of dollars per mile and constantly needs repair. Water systems, vet bills, fuel, and labor all pull from the same thin margin. Then there's the risk no spreadsheet can fully price: weather. One bad drought forces you to either buy expensive feed or sell off your herd at a loss, and a herd you spent years building can be liquidated in a single dry summer. One blizzard can kill calves overnight. And on top of the money, there's the labor most first-time buyers wildly underestimate. Ranching is a physical 7-day-a-week job with no off switch. Calving through freezing nights, fixing fence, hauling feed, doctoring sick animals. Hire that workout, and the wages erase your thin margin entirely. Do it yourself, and the ranch effectively pays you less than minimum wage for brutal hours. You are running a business whose main input, grass, depends entirely on rain you cannot control, and whose main product walks around on 4 legs and can die. And even the price you sell into is outside your hands, because cattle move in a long, punishing boom and bust rhythm called the cattle cycle. When prices are high, ranchers everywhere hold back females to breed and expand their herds, which years later floods the market with beef and crashes the price. When prices are low, they sell everything down, supply shrinks, and prices eventually spike again. The whole cycle takes about a decade to turn, and it means the record prices of 2025 and 2026 are not a permanent gift. They're the top of a wave that history says will roll back over. A rancher who expands aggressively at the peak, borrowing to buy cattle and land at record prices, is the classic figure who gets wiped out when the cycle turns. Your herd isn't just livestock, it's inventory whose value you don't set, in a market that punishes everyone who forgets it's a cycle. So if the cattle barely break even, why is this one of the most sought-after assets in the country? 3 reasons, and none of them are beef. The first is appreciation. While the cattle limp along at 2 to 4%, the land underneath them has been quietly climbing for years. U.S. farmland has appreciated steadily, and ranchland values in major cattle regions have risen for 5 to 7 straight years. That $2 million ranch might throw off almost nothing in cash, but if the land appreciates even 4 or 5% a year, it's silently making you $80,000 to $100,000 annually in value you don't see until you sell. The cattle income is the distraction. The land appreciation is the actual investment. Ranchland rarely falls in value from decade to decade, and in a world of inflation, a hard, finite, tangible asset that feeds people is exactly what large investors want to park money in, and that is exactly who has been buying. A striking share of America's ranchland is now owned not by working cattlemen, but by billionaires and investment funds treating it as a store of value. A handful of individuals and families now control millions of acres between them, some holding more land than entire small states, precisely because ranchland does what stocks and cash can't. It's tangible, it's scarce, it holds value through inflation and recessions, and it comes with tax advantages on top. When a tech founder or a pension fund buys a 100,000-acre ranch, they are not betting on the price of calves. They're buying the single most durable asset class there is, land that isn't making any more of itself, and letting a few cows keep the tax bill low while they hold it. The second reason is taxes, and this is the quiet engine of the whole thing. In most states, land that's used for genuine agriculture, grazing cattle, cutting hay, gets taxed on its farming value instead of its market value. This is called an agricultural exemption, and it can cut a property tax bill by 75 to 90%. Picture a piece of land near a growing city that's technically worth millions as future housing. Run a handful of cattle on it, keep the ag exemption, and your annual tax bill can drop from tens of thousands of dollars to a fraction of that. In some places, losing that status can send a tax bill from $1,500 to $15,000 overnight. So the cattle aren't really there to make money from beef. In many cases, they're there to legally hold down the taxes on an appreciating piece of land while you wait for it to be worth even more. The cows are a tax instrument that happens to move. The third reason is everything the land can earn that isn't cattle. And this is where smart ranchers actually turn a profit. The same acreage that barely breaks even on beef can be layered with income streams. Hunting leases, where you charge hunters for seasonal access, can bring in anywhere from $5 to $25 an acre for doing essentially nothing. You can lease grazing rights to another rancher, lease mineral or oil and gas rights beneath the surface, put up solar or wind installations, sell water, or run agritourism, weddings, cabins, dude ranch stays that can pull thousands of dollars per event. Some ranchers now sell beef directly to consumers at $8 to $15 a pound, instead of taking auction prices, capturing far more of the final value than the commodity market ever hands them, because at the auction barn, you're a price taker at the very bottom of the beef chain, while the packer, the distributor, and the grocery store split most of what the shopper actually pays. The ranchers who actually make money almost never rely on cattle alone. They treat the ranch as a portfolio of land-based income, and the herd is just one line on it, often the smallest one. So let's add it all up and answer the real question. What do you actually make owning a ranch? If you judge it purely on cattle, it's one of the worst businesses in America. A multi-million-dollar asset returning low single digits in cash, exposed to drought, disease, and brutal price cycles, demanding constant labor for a razor-thin margin. Judged that way, almost no ranch makes sense. But that was never the real scoreboard. Take that same $2 million ranch. The cattle clear maybe $25,000 in a good year. A hunting lease adds $15,000. The ag exemption saves you another $15,000 in taxes you'd otherwise pay. And the land underneath quietly appreciates $80,000 to $100,000. Suddenly, the operation that looked like a 1% business is actually building wealth at 6, 7, 8% a year. Most of it invisible, most of it in the dirt and the tax code, almost none of it in the beef. That's why ranches change hands at prices cattle could never justify, and why so many are bought by people who already made their fortune somewhere else. For them, The ranch isn't an income play. It's a place to store wealth that appreciates, shelters itself from tax, and hands back a way of life as the dividend. So if you ever do decide to buy a ranch, understand exactly what you're buying. Not a cattle business. The cattle will barely pay for themselves, and in a bad year they'll cost you dearly. You're buying land, a hard, finite, appreciating asset, wrapped in one of the best tax shelters in the country, that happens to let you live under an open sky and call yourself a rancher. The beef was never the point. The beef is the story you tell the tax assessor. The land was always the business, and the cattle are just the price of admission to owning it the smart way. And if you've caught the pattern by now, a business where the thing everyone thinks you're selling is really just a cover for where the money actually lives. You've seen it before on this channel. Watch the one on owning a crypto coin next, where the coin is worthless and the belief is everything. Then the one on owning a clothing brand, where the hoodie was never the business and the audience always was. It's the same trap wearing a different building every time.